The world of One Piece is so big and vast that it encompasses a lot of different cultures, power structures, mysteries, and characters, while making all of that feel so natural. It never feels like anything is too outlandish for the series, and almost everything and everyone has a place somewhere in the world. Do you want to visit an Old West town? Come check out Whiskey Peak that has giant cacti lined with literal gravestones for the Needles. Want a character who dresses like a baby but acts like a mafioso? We got that too, baby! But one of the common threads throughout the entire story is the presence and legend of the late king of the pirates, Gol D. Roger. Roger was the epitome of freedom and influence in a world so wide and varied. Everyone has heard of Roger and his exploits. Everyone felt the impact of his life and death. And even now, his presence is felt even stronger as we get closer to the One Piece. Roger and his crew did the impossible. They stood at the pinnacle of the pirating world and made the world government recognize him as the king of the pirates who conquered the seas. But the reality of Roger was that he was just a man. A man who wanted to go out to sea and have an adventure, to make friends and fight strong opponents, and just to get lots of treasure. He was a man who lived proudly, and because he never stopped believing in himself and his crew and the journey, he found the greatest treasure known to the world, the One Piece. Gol D. Roger, or Gold Roger if you believe in government propaganda, was the legendary pirate that became the king of the pirates by conquering the mysterious sea known as the Grand Line and finding the great treasure of the One Piece on the final island of Raftel, or Laugh Tale. For most of his life, he was a pirate and went out to sea when he was a young man with his future first mate and vice captain, Silvers Rayleigh. While we don't know too much about the specific adventures of Roger and his crew, we do know that Roger spent a lot of time in his life as a pirate. He had clashes with other famous groups like the God's Knights, the Rocks Pirates, and the Marines, that all led to historic battles that lasted longer than they ever did. It wasn't until much later in his life that we found out that Roger had an incurable disease and made his last bid in the world to find the last island, defy the government's warnings, and find a mysterious secret treasure that the world hasn't seen for 800 plus years. During this period of sickness, Roger lived his life as fully as he could and seemed to have retread a lot of ground from his old adventures, but he never lost that smile of his while doing it. During the Wano flashback, we see him returning to Water 7 and meeting with Tom, the shipwright that built his flagship, the Oro Jackson. Because of their adventures in Sky Island, he needed some repairs on the ship again. You see in this flashback that Roger had this relationship already with Tom and Kokoro, where even the crew was excited to see Tom again. During Frankie's flashback, we see that Tom was willing to give his life, admitting that he built the Oro Jackson for Roger. He liked Roger. He was proud of the ship that he built, and he wasn't going to hide that just because the government was going to kill him. Roger was someone that a lot of people in the world believed in, someone who they enjoyed being around. Hearing people like Rayleigh or Shanks talk about Roger really highlights the good and bad characteristics of him, but also show a deep sense of understanding, love, and respect for the man that they followed. I mean, hell, even one of the best old men in the series, Monkey D. Garp, couldn't help but have that same level of respect for a man who, by all means, was just another criminal to him. A man who fought an army for his friends, who fought with him in God Valley to take down the Rocks Pirates, and who entrusted him with the knowledge of Roger's unborn son, because he knew that Garp wouldn't let Ace suffer just because he was born with Roger's blood. By almost all accounts, Roger earned his reputation 1,000 times over, and showed the kind of man he was to his friends and to his enemies. He was just a man, but a man worthy of becoming king of the pirates. Was Roger important to the world because he was Roger, or because he was the king of the pirates? I think that's a major question to ask in this series, and it all depends on who and how you ask. For instance, if you ask the world government, they would probably tell you it's because he became the king of the pirates and defied the government by conquering the sea as the most powerful pirate group of the era. But if you ask someone like Rayleigh or Shanks or even Buggy, you see that Roger was important because of who he was. A spirited captain who traveled with laughter, fought with passionate fervor, and believed in his crew more than anything else. The biggest impact Roger had on the world was becoming the king of the pirates and dying in Logtown, as he proclaimed that the One Piece is out there waiting for someone to come find it. He created the Great Pirate Era and sent the world out looking for something that inspired their sense of adventure, that fed into their dreams of something greater than what they had. Roger gave the fire of dreams to the people of the entire One Piece world by making them believe they could go out to sea and find this great treasure. Even outside of the mainstream media propaganda of the world government and world newspaper, Roger's impact had influence on the biggest powers of the world. His influence at God Valley changed the landscape of the entire sea. By fighting rocks in the God's Knights, he destroyed one of the strongest pirate crews while also setting up 3 future emperors to fill that power vacuum. And during that same fight, Garp was able to prove himself as the hero of the Navy, which helped him stay free of the influence of the Celestial Dragons while still being a Marine. His reputation and refusal to promote himself to Admiral or Fleet Admiral is the only thing that stopped the Gorosei and the Celestial Dragons from dealing with his antics. Even in the final moments of the Marineford War, Whitebeard thought of Roger and their last talk. The discussion about the will of D and the story from long ago that helped influence Whitebeard in seeing the power of inherited dreams as he used the last of his strength to save his crew, his family, and Luffy from Akainu. With his last breath, with Roger on his mind, he tells the world that the One Piece is real, and the world is going to change when it's found. One of the more recent examples is with Kaido, who we all know is called the strongest creature alive. During his fight with Luffy, Kaido saw the image of people he knew from his past that could fight him on equal or better footing. People like Odin, Shanks, Whitebeard, Rocks, and, you guessed it, Roger. Roger's influence through the world is felt through the actions of other characters that knew him, that believed in him, that fought him. He changed the perspective of so many characters just by being himself. His presence is felt so deeply in this world, but there's also something kind of bittersweet about it. Almost like there's only just so much of him left, even after everything that he did. The biggest carriers of his belief, his legacy, is his former crew. I might touch on a bit of recent chapter spoilers, so if you're not caught up to the current chapter, I would suggest skipping ahead to the next section. Roger's crew was legendary. They had people so strong they could go toe-to-toe with people like Rocks, Kaido, Big Mom, Whitebeard, Shiki, Garp, and the God's Knights. These are people who shaped the entire future of the world and the pirating landscape at large. Let's start with the first Roger pirate we've ever met in the series, Shanks. We met Shanks first in the flashback to Luffy's hometown, where it was described how Luffy got his devil fruit and how he met the red-haired pirates. From the very beginning, we see Shanks as this free spirit who loves to party, have fun, but also knows when to take things very seriously. He's fine with petty things like getting booze dumped on him, or food thrown at him, or just people insulting him in general. But the second it happens to someone he cares about, like Luffy, he switches to pirate mode real quick. He'll kill your entire crew and burn you to the seams for just hurting his friends. As the series went on, we hear more from other characters like Buggy and Rayleigh about who Shanks was. To Buggy, he was a friend, but also a rival. He was someone who he trusted and felt betrayed him, which is why he had such a deep sense of distrust and hate for Shanks later in his life. Rayleigh viewed Shanks as, well, even now as an emperor, the same young man who he found in a treasure chest so long ago that Roger and him took in as basically their son. Shanks seems to hold a lot of respect and love for his late captain, talking about him fondly with other members like Rayleigh and Gabon when meeting up with them. One of the biggest things he remembers was the final words Roger spoke of his dream. The same dream Luffy has, but that were never actually heard verbalized in the series yet. This touched Shanks so deeply, possibly even pushing him to see Luffy as something more than just a dumb kid who wanted to be a pirate. This kid reminded him of himself, and reminded him of Roger. Up next is Buggy the Clown. I know he might look like a silly little man, but he really was one of the most promising pirates that came out of Roger's crew. Buggy and Shanks were buds, rivals, and honestly, some of the most successful members of Roger's crew after it was disbanded. Buggy went from some no-name pirate that terrorized the weakest sea to one of the only people in the entirety of the world to escape Impel Down and break out with hundreds of other prisoners, to being a pivotal force of the Marineford War with those prisoners, to becoming a warlord of the sea after the war, to then becoming an emperor of the sea with Crocodile and Mihawk as partners. I know Roger had a lot of love and favor for Shanks, and even Buggy knew in his heart that Shanks would be the shining star, the prodigy that would become the next king of the pirates. But because Shanks shone so brightly, no one, except maybe Shanks himself, noticed that Buggy was just as bright, just as capable of being a great pirate. I think that's something Roger saw in Buggy and why he stayed in the crew as an apprentice with Shanks. But that's just a theory of mine. An anime theory. Next, I want to talk about the two men on the crew that supported Roger the most, Silvers Rayleigh and Scopper Gaban. Dubbed the right and left hand of the Pirate King, these two gilfs are the living legends that faded away into obscurity after the disbanding and death of Roger and the Roger Pirates. For the most part, they built their own lives after the adventures. Both of them have taken a wife, a home, and even a community to watch over. For Rayleigh, he had his own adventures outside of the Roger Pirates. Rayleigh met people like Hachi and the Gorgon sisters from Amazon Lily after they escaped slavery. He eventually settled with Shaki on Saboti and started his own boat coating business. Granted, that doesn't mean he never lost his pirate mischief side. He still sold himself into slavery to then steal from rich people who bought him before escaping to fuel his gambling habits. Though Rayleigh settled and started a new, more domesticated life, if you can call selling yourself into slavery to steal from rich people domesticated, he thought of Roger and his former crew often. He even tells Luffy when they finally meet what he did the day Roger died. He said, "There was no other day I laughed as much. There was no other day I cried as much or drank as much. Our captain lived a wonderful life." Rayleigh loved Roger. He was his partner, his friend, his captain. They lived through so many trials and adventures together that I think it would be hard to dispute the fact that they probably knew each other better than anyone else. Which is why it meant more to hear from Shanks one day that he lost his left arm and the straw hat that was given to him by Roger himself to a little boy. A little boy in the East Blue who Shanks said spoke the exact same words as their captain. Maybe you can call it fate, or destiny, or an old man holding on to the inherited will passed on by his captain, but when Rayleigh finally met Luffy, he saw Roger again. Granted, Luffy is his own person with his own way of doing things, but all the heart and love for adventure and friends, it was there. In a way, Roger was right. He never died. Now we get to the most recent character to be introduced in the present, but is already making quite the big impact, Scopper Gaban, the Mountain Eater. As far as we know, after the Roger Pirates disbanded, Gaban found his way back to Elbaf and met his now wife, Ripley, and oh my god is she so pretty. They soon after gave birth to a boy, Colin. For the most part, Gaban has gone off on some travels, but mostly been staying in Elbaf. We do see in the cover stories that he visited the Twin Capes and visited Crocus, but other than that, we don't know much of where he was or what he's been doing. The citizens of Elbaf refer to him as Yasan, and have a very good relationship with him and even know his true identity as Scopper Gaban from the Roger Pirates. They all believe him to be a very strong person and quite the defender for Elbaf. I think the biggest thing we've seen recently was when Shanks came to visit Gaban, informing him about Luffy's arrival. Gaban, having never met Luffy, tells Shanks that he won't trust Luffy that easily, which Shanks kinda laughs off before saying, "You can do as you please, Gaban." Finally, I want to talk about the one member of the Roger Pirates that I think was the most affected by Roger and his journey in finding the One Piece, Kozuki Oden. Oden was a brat for most of his life. Strong and spirited beyond belief, but a brat who did what he wanted for better or for worse. It wasn't until he met his retainers, Toki, Whitebeard, and Roger did he truly develop as a person into someone who could lead and carry a country on his back. But when Odin followed Roger to the final island, found the secret treasure of the world, and came back home, his goal was to prepare and open the land of Wano and reconnect with the world at large like it used to be 800 plus years ago. When Odin finally learned about Roger's death, he said something very interesting and familiar. Do you remember what Rayleigh said about Roger's death all the way back in Subodhi? Well, take a look at what Odin said. Roger, you're unbelievable. You've lived quite a life. Almost the exact same reaction. Crying, smiling, and laughing, commenting on what a life Roger lived. Like I said before, it doesn't matter if it was fate or destiny, but Roger's influence on all these lives feels like it was just meant to be. Without Roger, Odin wouldn't have been able to set up Wano to return to the world stage and be free from Kaido's reign. Without Roger, Shanks, Rayleigh, and Gaban would have never met or helped Luffy and his crew. Hell, Luffy would probably have never met Shanks or started his pirate journey at all. Roger and his last adventure changed the world and created something even greater than himself. An era where people go out to sea and dream of adventure and treasures to be found. He changed the landscape of the pirating world and the world government by openly chasing his wild fantasy to the ends of the world. Without Roger, there would be no story like there is now. There would be no connection between the past and the present. Roger wasn't the promised one, the prodigy, the one who would save us all from the ruin at the last second. He was just a man who wanted to go out on an adventure, but turned the world upside down along the way. And boy howdy, he really did. Thank you all for watching. I've always loved the character and figure of Roger in this story, and to me, he's the epitome of what every story should have for a legendary figure. Someone we may never know everything about, someone we can look up to and compare ourselves and the characters to, and someone we can see who truly lived a remarkable life while he was here. But before I go, I wanted to say please remember to like, comment, and subscribe, and if you want to see more content like this, I'll do it, because I really like talking about One Piece, and any anime I really love like Dungeon Meshi. I'll see you all in the next one. Take care.